All right. Are you ready to get psyched? Excellent. Well, I see some wariness in some areas, right? Well, maybe you're wary because you see psychologists and you think, oh, maybe I'm going to analyze you. Well, oh, good. I'm glad not. Or maybe you think, oh, I'm a mind reader, right? Or maybe some of you are thinking, whoa, hang on. That Indian guy, he's not a doctor or an engineer, right? Yeah. People see Indian and they jump to doctor or engineer, and don't worry, Indians do it all the time too, right? I was in graduate school, and I remember I went to this potluck, so I thought, hey, free food, right, grad school? And there were 40 other Indians there, and every single one of them said to me, hey, what sort of engineer are you? And I'd said, I'm not an engineer. And they said, oh, you must be a doctor then. No. Now here's the thing, right? You're probably guessing, but you know a lot of Indians who are engineers and Indians who are doctors. And I think that's the thing about stereotypes. They're useful. They're mostly true, but they're not always true. And I think that's one of the big things we have to hang on to. Just like that Indian stereotype, I'm also guessing that you have some psychology stereotypes. If I say psychology, what comes to your mind? What do you think, psychology? Oh, you don't want to see it? Some people go Freud. Some people go, oh, a whole bunch of old white guys, right? They go, oh, couches, therapy. That's what a lot of people think about with psychology. But here's the reality. Psychology is a lot more than that. It's part of it, but there's a lot more to psychology than couches and Freud, right? When you look at life is complex. Right? Years of psychological research has shown that there is a set of critical tools that make life easier. And here's the bottom line for you. If you get psyched, you can think stronger and live longer. Why? Because our thinking, our feeling, our behaviors, they have multiple determinants. It's not just one thing. It's multiple determinants. Many things determine all those things that we are. And you need to get psyched for the big picture, all right? What is it? What is the big picture? Why are all these things that are going on? Well, let's go back to, the stereotypes, all right? I mentioned you may think psych is just one thing or the other. The reality is, psych is a lot more than just one narrow area of therapy, all right? I've been a psychologist for 25 years or so, and the reality is there's a lot that I do. Now, here's what gets interesting. I may not be able to read your mind or analyze you. I'm not that kind of psychologist. That's just a clinical psychologist, and that's what clinical psychologists do. That's who does the analysis. But I am a social psychologist, and I can tell you what I can do is predict behavior. So a lot of my research, for example, looks at clothing, and I can tell, based on what you are wearing, a lot about you. And I know some of you are really grateful that it's sort of dark out there, okay? You need to talk to me later. Right? Predictions, right? Predictions. You can predict things. When I was at UCLA, we did work that showed that just based on your gender, I can probably predict how you're going to deal with stress. For many, many years, people thought, hey, everybody just fights or flees, right? It's that response, fight or flee, and you've heard about that. But we did work that showed that women may actually have an additional stress response. Women tend and befriend, in addition to just fighting or fleeing. That's new stuff. That's what psychological research shows. Right now, I'm doing a lot of research on teaching and learning in the classroom, so I try to predict, from a small set of information, predict which students need more help in learning than the others, right? That's the predictive stuff that goes on. So doing research in psychology for all these years has really shown me that psychology is everywhere. Psychology is much more Sherlock Holmes and CSI than it is Freud and couches, right? We are exploring what's going on. Everywhere you look, there's psychology. Pick a job, any job, right? Maybe you work in healthcare. Maybe you work in the food service. Maybe you work in business or industry. Psychology is in there. You need psychology, and the better you understand psychology and how people work, the better you are going to be at those jobs, no matter what that job may be. So, let's answer some questions for you. How and why do we do what we do? I'm going to narrow it down for you, right? Good news, people. This is worth it. 50 to 100 years of psych research right here, right now, all right? And for those of you who go, hey, man, I shouldn't have taken intro psych. I'd have just listened to this TED Talk. Well, maybe so, all right? when you think about why we think, behave, and feel the way we do, I'm going to narrow it down to 3 things, all right? We think, feel, and behave because of the biological basis beneath them, right? Thinking, feeling, and behaving has a basis of we learn how to do that. Thinking, feeling, and behaving is driven by our social surroundings and the people around us. Okay, 3 very important things to keep in mind. Biology, learning, and our social surroundings. One of my favorite examples that makes this point clear is emotions. And we've heard a lot about emotions today, right? When I first started teaching intro psych, we would put up these 5 pictures and say, all around the world, people will recognize these 5 emotions. We thought that there was a biological footprint for those 5 emotions. New psychological research said that's not the case. Emotions are dependent on biology. Emotions are dependent on what you have learned and what your experiences have been. And your emotions are determined on the people around you. The very same event can be experienced as a different emotion depending on who you are, what your learning is, and who is around you. That's fascinating stuff, right? Feelings have multiple determinants. You need to get psyched for the big picture, right? Very important. You need to get psyched for the big picture. So let's break some of this down. All right, I said biology, learning, and social networks. Biology, this is just absolutely fascinating. You've heard a lot about biology. I'm betting a lot of you know a little bit about biology in the brain. But when you stop to think about the absolutely magnificent stuff going on right here, it is, pun intended, mind-boggling, right? When you look at the brain, we all know there are neurons. How many neurons? We now know about 86 billion neurons. 86 billion neurons. Each of those neurons have tens of thousands of connections. Do you want to picture how many connections those are? Picture this. See the space inside my hand right here? If you take brain matter that fits inside that space there are more connections than all the stars in the Milky Way. Yeah, think about that. And every time you think, even that sigh, those connections and those neurons have already fired tens of thousands of times. And by the time I'm done with this talk, they've fired billions of times. That's the biology we're dealing with. And you know what's even cooler? Most of that activity is non-conscious. By the time you consciously think a thought, thousands and billions of interactions have gone on at the level of your brain. Free will, it's mostly an illusion. You may think, oh, I'm doing stuff, but your brain's been firing, all right? It's been firing over and over again. By the time something pops into your consciousness, your brain's already done tons of the work, okay? Biology also actually gives us some big clues into some everyday things. Take obesity. Take being overweight, all right? I have a really good friend who is very overweight. He is maybe 1 inch taller than I am, and he is 2.5 times my weight, all right? He's pretty heavy. And it really gets me when people look at him and go, oh, he's probably that way because he eats poorly. He's probably that way because he sits around and does nothing, right? Food, inactivity can contribute. But what we now know is that, interestingly enough, the arrows of the directions actually go the other way. Here's a scary thought. When we put on a certain amount of weight, our body changes how we think. And we think about eating more. We want to sit back and do nothing. So instead of those 2 things influencing you putting on weight, it's actually the other way around because of how biology is working. Biology. And almost everything that you and I do has a biological basis. You don't need to, take a whole bunch more than the types of stuff I've said. You've got to stop and think, wow, part of my behavior is my biology. Now, this doesn't mean you just sit back and go, oh, it's my biology. Nothing I can do about it. So aggressive. Nope, it's not me. It's my biology. No, it's just part of the puzzle, all right? Weight gain, multiple determinants. You need to get psyched for the big picture. How about learning? Reward and punishment. By the time we sit here, we have a lifetime of learning. Even if you're sitting here and you're 5, you've still had a whole bunch of learning, right? Everything you think and do, you have learned. When you do something and it is followed by a positive event, you do that thing more. You were nodding. Oh, I'm going to stand here a little bit more. Thank you. Nod some more. It's reinforcing, right? If you do something and it's punished, you're going to do that less. A lot of the stuff that we do is this very funky, non-conscious deal. Very often, we don't even realize who's rewarding and punishing us. It's happening. It's those little looks, those little smiles, right? Reward and punishment shapes our behavior. There's also observational learning, classic study in psychology, the Bobo doll study, right? When kids saw a Bobo doll, this big inflatable doll being hit, when left alone with that same doll, they hit the doll as well. Think of the implications. Kids see parents smoking, they're more likely to smoke. Kids see parents marching in a hate-mongering parade, they're more likely to develop hate and racism. All right? Kids learn. Everything we do as parents, our kids are watching us. Earlier today, you heard the phrase, kids are invisible. Some people think kids are invisible. They're not. We've got to be paying more attention to them, right? Because everything that we do can make a big difference. There's connections, too. Right, this is fascinating. Social networks. So now when I think about connections, you think about Facebook and social media. The reality is all of us live in a community. We live with people, whether it's our friends or partners. We are connected. And connections make a big deal of difference in how we behave. Let me tell you about something I did in grad school again. I did this little study for my dissertation, actually, where I brought couples into the lab, gave them a list of topics that couples normally fought about, and I said, I'm going to leave the room for 10 minutes, pick a topic, and talk about it, all right? So I'd leave the room, and they'd talk about it, and they'd get into a conflict, but lo and behold, I can predict, based on psychological science, the couples who'd be together 6 months later from the type of social network and social support that they had. That's the power of your social networks. So there's good news and there's bad news. What do you want first? You're getting the bad, all right? Here's the bad news. Here's the bad news. By the time you sit here, you have your biology, you have your learning, you've got your social connections. To a large extent, what we have is what we have. But there's good news. It doesn't have to be, all right? It doesn't have to be. And these are the 3 things I'm going to have you practice as you go out into the world. Chill, drill, and build, all right? If you really want to get psyched, if you want the big picture, you've got to chill, you've got to drill, you've got to build. Here's what I mean. This is a biggie. Remember I said that a lot of our behavior is driven by our biology? What's going on is all those connections, right, are releasing neurochemicals. When we have a lot of testosterone in our system, we get aggressive. When you have a lot of cortisol or catecholamines in your system, you feel stressed. And like I said, most of this is non-conscious. It's there. It's circulating. The best thing that you can do when you are angry is literally chill. Step back from the situation. All right? Step back from the situation. Somebody really ticking you off? Step back from the situation. Chill. Let those brain chemicals subside. All right? Literally by chilling and giving your brain some time, the neurons and your chemicals to reset, you're going to be better off. Big thing with anger. A lot of people think, oh, let's throw some stuff. It makes me feel better. I'm going to go for a run. It makes me feel better. Guess what? Research shows that instead of throwing something or even going for a run, taking that time for just quiet, pulling back away from the situation is much better for your anger. Again, those brain chemicals subside and they go down. Chill. Really useful. Really useful. Okay? How about drill? Practice, practice, practice. Big word that you need to be aware of. As you and I sit here, the way we think is mostly automatic. All right? It's mostly automatic. I mentioned stereotypes before, right? You see Indian, you may think doctor or engineer. That's okay. It's automatic, but don't stop there. Go beyond it. All right? Stereotypes are just a mental shortcut. They're useful, but go beyond it. Stress. You know what stressful this is? Right? When we think about public speaking, we go, oh, that's so stressful. But we can go, but that's that first automatic thought. We don't have to stick with that automatic thought. Just because it's automatically what comes to your mind, you can say, you know what? Yeah, but actually it's not that bad. It's a challenge. And boy, that's what I know a lot of the folks who spoke today, this is a cool challenge. And it becomes less stressful. Failure, that's a big one, right? Fear forward, we talked about. Failure. When you fail, your lifetime of learning gives you an automatic thought that pops into your head. It's automatic, but you don't have to let it be. Just because it's automatic doesn't mean you have to sit with it. If you fail and the thought that pops into your head is, yep, that's me, I always fail. This happens in school a lot. Somebody doesn't do well on exam 1, and they may say, yep, I'm not a good student. totally changes how they deal with studying for the next exam. Just because a thought is automatic, just because you have it as you sit here, doesn't mean it's what you need to stay with. Change those automatic thoughts. Change those automatic thoughts. And the only way you can do it, ladies and gentlemen, is by practicing. Because they're automatic for a reason. They serve a purpose. It's going to be tough, but you got to practice and practice and practice. Drill thinking differently. Drill yourself into thinking more positively. Critical stuff to do. Chill, drill, and build. Social support is probably one of the most powerful things you can have for yourself. People with higher levels of social support live longer, don't get sick as fast, and when they do get sick, they recover faster. You want a real connection between psychology and biology and health? Think about this recent study. In this study, researchers gave a large sample a cold virus. They literally shot a cold virus into their system. And if you're thinking, "Ooh, can they do that?" They got approval. They got consent. It sounds a little shady. I know what you're thinking, right? But they gave them a cold virus. And guess what? Not surprisingly, almost everybody got sick. They were shot with a cold virus, okay? Not surprisingly, almost everybody got sick. But check this out. Those individuals who had high levels of social support did not have as severe symptoms as those who did not. Same cold virus. They got sick, but more social support, and their symptoms were not as bad. So, by the time we think about why we do what we do, here are some facts. It's biologically based. Facts. We've learned how to feel that way based on reward and punishment. Fact. It's determined by our situations. But there is stuff that we can do about it. There is stuff that we can do about it. And psychological science strongly suggests that we need to really tackle those head on. Acknowledge what's automatic. Acknowledge the biology, right? But then chill, drill, and build. Psychology, it's not rocket science. It's tougher, okay? Because we are such complex human beings. Feeling, thinking, behaving has so many multiple determinants. So, I hope that with these simple tips, you can get psyched, think stronger, and live longer. Thank you.